paper boat. Z89 sat quietly watching the others. There was so much she wanted to say, but she must wait her turn. Everyone in the circle wore white except for the teacher, who was in green. Everyone had shaved heads except the teacher, who had short grey hair. Everyone was different. The colour of their eyes, their skin, the shape of their nose and mouth, and their voices, when allowed to speak, ranged from gruff and deep to high and sweet. Z89 enjoyed the communicate sessions. They could speak freely if they followed the statement they were to discuss. Z77, what are your views? The grey teacher turned to a red-faced boy sitting to his right. The young man rubbed his face and blinked hard several times. Sorry? My views? On what? Mr. Verdi leaned towards him and poked him with his silver-topped walking stick. Wake up, boy. Men are stronger than women. What do you think? The boy blinked again. I think women are very strong. They have to go through hours of pain and discomfort in childbirth. The girls nodded. They had all seen the film recording and all silently decided they were never having children. A deep voice came from the other side of the circle. Men have to be strong as well. It's their baby too. They have to be very brave and they have to give their baby away. It was Z42 Febcon who had spoken. Z89 looked at the young man sitting opposite her. His long legs stretched out in front of him and crossed at the ankle. She thought he looked very relaxed. She could see there were still tufts of red hair pushing through his scalp, and automatically scratched her own shaven head, feeling a few odd tufts beginning to grow there. Their eyes caught, just for a moment, and she hurriedly looked down as she clasped her hands tightly in her lap and began to study the short nails on her right hand. Mr. Verdi smiled. You are quite right, Z42. That is part of the life cycle of humans. Babies must be taken away at birth, so parents cannot prejudice them while they are growing up. Children should not be like their parents. They should make their own choices in life. Butterfly. Erin found herself sitting at the front of her English class, right under the long nose and sharp eyes of Mrs. Hamilton. There was no escape from her glare, and now Erin found herself becoming very uncomfortable. Come on, Erin, we haven't got all day. Read out the passage. Thank you. The teacher spoke in a short, snappy way, expecting everyone to do her bidding. Erin coughed and then began to read from Animal Farm. Once she started, she became more fluent and quite enjoyed reading it out loud, until she was hit on the back by a hard object and she stuttered to a standstill. Now what? Mrs. Hamilton had been following the story and not seen Erin being hit by a large furry pencil case, as it turned out. Erin held up the bright pink weapon. Someone hit me with this, miss. Honestly, year 10, what am I going to do with you? Who threw it? The heavy silence in the bright, airy classroom spoke no words, but was punctuated by commas of laughter. A deep voice came suddenly from behind Erin. It was me, miss. Sorry, Erin. I was trying to hit Digby. The laughter bubbled up and then exploded as the boy, Alan, stood and grabbed the pencil case, catching Digby by the shoulder as he returned to his seat. Digby reacted by gesturing a finger at the others. That's enough, class. Quiet down now. But the students had had enough of learning. It was a Friday afternoon, only half an hour to go until the bell and freedom. Digby reached over and pushed a pile of books off Alan's desk. Mrs. Hamilton decided to change tack. Right, you two boys, detention after school. The rest of you can answer the questions on the sheet about chapter 3. When she saw other pupils smirking at this, she added, and anyone who doesn't complete the work may be joining them. Erin waited for Petra by the school gates. It wasn't like her to be late, she thought. She checked the time on her phone for about the 10th time and decided to give up and make her own way back. Erin hoisted the heavy school bag onto her shoulder and turned towards home. Thankfully, it wasn't far. The school was halfway up the hill, a large red brick building sitting in state, an imposing edifice for the new children who began there, but as time went on, it became more of a home for some and a prison for others. Erin always felt trapped at school, but she loved to draw and found she could escape to the art room to find solace. One more year here and then freedom, she thought. At the top of the hill, instead of going straight home, she carried on towards the place of the seven spirits. Here she dropped her bag on the altar stone and rummaged through books, PE kit and various chocolate bar wrappers until she found her sketchbook and pencil. Sitting with her back against the cold stone, Erin opened the book and flicked through her last few sketches. Since coming back from Cornwall, she hadn't been able to draw. Every time she tried, the pencil strokes seemed to have a mind of their own, and she would become frustrated and finish up scratching sharp lines through the images. Now her pencil began sketching what she remembered about the farm in Cornwall. Soon she had a rough outline of the house and a bird's-eye view of the farm buildings mapped out in front of her. She recalled what Malachi told her and thought to herself, "This is mad. We're in the 21st century. Why would a school be hidden underground? There must be a logical explanation." She still felt very uneasy about everything that had happened and wished she could talk to Petra. She's the practical one. She'll make sense of it all. Throwing the sketch pad onto the ground, she pulled her knees up and wrapped her arms round them, hugging herself. Sitting there, looking out across the chocolate box market town, contemplating her frustrating life, Erin was suddenly aware she wasn't alone. A voice she recognised came floating across the grass. It was Petra. Finally, she thought. As Erin began to scramble up, eager to see her friend, another voice joined the first, a deeper, richer sound punctuated by soft, lilting laughter from Petra. Her best friend was with someone, and Erin knew exactly who she was with. Erin grabbed her bag and sketchbook and crawled behind the altar stone. She didn't want to be seen, but she wanted to see why Petra had brought Shay to their special place. The two voices, one soft, one warm, came closer until Erin could make out the words. "I don't know. What do you think?" Petra was saying. "I think it's a good idea, Pet." Erin was astonished. Her friend didn't allow anyone to call her that. She watched from behind the cold stone as they both sat down with their backs against one of the spirit rocks. To Erin, they seemed to be getting rather too close to each other. Shay's black dreadlocks fell across his face, and he brushed them away as he bent towards Petra. "Should we tell her?" It was Shay asking a question. "No, not yet. We need to get used to the idea now we've finally found each other." Petra turned towards the boy who Erin had loved from afar for so long. Then, to her consternation, her best friend, who knew how Erin felt about Shay, flung her arms around the boy of her dreams and they held each other close. Erin backed away to hide further from her friends and cried silent tears. She slunk away quietly, not wanting to hear any more of their conversation. "Os!" Erin bowed respectfully to her karate teacher, her sensei. She felt empowered when she was in her white gi, the thick cotton jacket and trousers with the black silk belt wrapped around her tiny waist. The class began. Erin standing at the left-hand side of the training room with the other black belts, the rest of the students lined up alongside, their belts creating a rainbow that stretched to the other side of the room. Working her way through the different colours over the last few years meant that people showed her respect by bowing to her. Each grading was challenging, but nothing more so, than that final grading. She had just turned 14 and been quite intimidated by the many men and ladies who were already black belts watching her, testing her, sizing her up. But she did it, and they were impressed by her technique and her spirit. Now, standing here, Erin used her karate to calm herself after the earlier encounter at the spirits. She wanted to punch and kick until the pain and anguish of being let down by her friends, her family, even Mal, who seemed besotted by this girl Cara, would evaporate and she could be the girl she was before and life could return to normal. Erin moved through the series of actions that made up the kata she knew so well, feeling a sense of peace. Her body remembered the strong, powerful movements and the slow, gentle gestures. They were part of her soul. Erin bowed at the end and realised what she must now do. One of the morals learned by practising karate was to defend the paths of truth. She wanted to find out the truth behind Petra and Shay, the truth behind her parents, but most of all, the truth about Miranda. She needed to meet her, to know her, and to be part of her life, whatever it cost. The weeks seemed to fly by. Erin met with her friends, and Petra was often there, but now there was a barrier between them. Neither of them knew how to break it down. Willow and Elsa were good friends, yet they didn't understand Erin like Petra did. Erin began to spend more time with Nadir. He made her laugh, and that was what she craved. They started meeting at the Seven Spirits. Nadir practised kung fu, and they shared martial arts moves. They usually finished up laughing at each other, especially when Nadir did a voiceover impersonating a sports commentator. One evening they were standing in the centre of the 7 rocks, facing each other, bowing with respect, when Petra and Willow appeared. "Hi, guys," called Willow. Her makeup, as usual, was impeccable, although Erin knew it wasn't just worn for effect. Scar tissue from when she'd been burnt quite badly as a child by a scalding kettle smothered one side of her face. She had pulled the cord dangling over the kitchen worktop, and that was it. Erin was amazed by how her friend never complained and just embraced life in every way. Now Willow came over to them, with Petra trailing behind her. Nadir and Erin broke off from sparring and mumbled a hello. "Hello, Erin," Petra said pointedly. "How are you?" Erin shuffled her feet, put her hands in her pockets and sighed. "Good, thanks. You?" "Yeah, good." It was Nadir who broke the awkward silence that followed. "Right, ladies, what will it be?" He grabbed his rucksack and after scrabbling around for something, he produced, like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, several bars of chocolate, some crisps and bottles of Coke and lemonade. Willow grabbed the largest bar of chocolate. She had a very sweet tooth. Planting herself on a rock and ripping open the foil wrapping, she announced, "Thanks, Nadir. We're not just friends with you because you can get stuff for free from your uncle's shop, you know, but it's nice for you to share them with us." "There has to be some perks to the job," Nadir replied, twisting off a cap on the Coke. It fizzed furiously and spurted over his shirt. He wiped the droplets away with his hand. Nadir worked for his uncle at weekends, carrying stock, cleaning the floors, serving customers, and he always had food and drink in his bag. Erin and Petra took some crisps each and sat down, not talking. "What is it with you?" asked Willow. "Nothing," muttered Erin. "I don't really know," Petra said, suddenly standing. "It's ever since you went away. You just won't talk to me." She stood facing Erin. "Please tell me what I've done wrong." Erin looked at her friend. "I can't tell you," she thought. And out loud she said, "There's nothing wrong." In her mind's eye she saw a sudden image of Petra kissing Shay. She stood and then, grabbing her bag and coat, Erin made her way through the long grass to the entrance, throwing words behind her. "I have to go. Sorry, it's getting late. Can't stop." "Hey, wait!" shouted Nadir. "What's the matter?" "Nothing. Nothing's the matter. I must go home. My grandparents are coming over." With that, Erin turned away and hurried towards her house on the corner. She could feel their eyes boring into the back of her skull. Why couldn't she talk to Petra? What was stopping her from sharing what she knew? "I hate secrets and lying to people," Erin thought angrily, arriving at the driveway to her house. Passing a bright red sports car in front of the house, she smiled. Her granddad loved to drive fast, and they were here early as usual. What she said was true. Her grandparents were coming over that evening. Turning the key in the lock, Erin wasn't surprised when the door was pulled open and there stood her granddad. Marcus Trent was a formidable character. 75 years old, but still very upright and athletic. "Erin, my favourite granddaughter!" he exclaimed. "Your only granddaughter," replied Erin, snuggling into his warm embrace. Saying this made her think of Miranda. How did her sister feel about her absent family? "There are 2 of us," she whispered into his thick jumper. "What's that? What'd you say?" "My hearing's going a bit. Getting old, I suppose," her granddad sighed. "Never mind, nothing important. How are you, Grandpops?" She stepped back, closed the door behind her and studied his face closely. His brown eyes twinkled below bushy grey eyebrows, his skin red and raw by cold winds, and the hot sun from hours walking his 2 beloved dogs, 2 chocolate Labradors, Fizz and Pop. They strolled arm in arm through to the kitchen while Marcus shared with her what he had been up to in their little cottage in Norfolk. He was always making something in his shed or repairing various battered old appliances. Erin could see her grandmother, Dinah, sitting in the big armchair that looked out to the garden. She was drinking tea and looked relaxed. Her silver grey hair was cut short and contrasted well with the red woolen dress she wore with a vibrant purple and scarlet scarf. Kneeling on the floor next to this elegant woman, Erin smiled up at Dinah's life-worn face. The grey eyes crinkled as she smiled back and leaned over to hug the thin young girl. Dinah stroked her granddaughter's long black hair and remarked how well she was looking. Later that evening, Erin gently knocked on her brother's door. His gruff voice replied and she entered. Since Mal had met Cara, he seemed more distant. The brother and sister had never been close. Erin often felt her parents loved him more than her, but during their time in Cornwall, Erin felt closer to Malachi. He was on her side for a change, and she felt his equal in them, both not knowing about their sister Miranda. Mal was sitting on his leather gaming chair, staring at his phone and hurriedly pushing in a message. His school books were piled around him and a textbook lay open on his lap. "Yes," he said, without looking up from his screen. "I'm busy, revising. I have an exam tomorrow." "Yes, I can see you're revising," Erin laughed. "Revising your new girlfriend." She sat down on the black leather beanbag that was slumped next to his desk. "Can we talk? About Miranda?" Mal looked up at that. "I didn't think you wanted to. I thought you were going to carry on as before, just like Dad suggested." "Tonight, spending time with family got me thinking about our sister. She should be part of this, getting to know her family, not stuck away where no one cares about her. We don't know she's unhappy. It's the only life she's known, so she has nothing to compare it with. Yet sitting there, knowing Mum and Dad have lied to us, I began to think about what else they haven't told us. I don't know what to think or do anymore. I don't know who to trust or who to listen to. I just feel hollow inside." "I know what you mean. I feel it too." "I do know we have to meet her. Miranda, that is. I want her to be part of our lives now." Erin then tried to explain how she felt throughout her life of there being something missing. "I've had pains and aches in my body, but the doctor can never find anything wrong. I've been ill for no reason whatsoever. Sometimes I have a voice speaking to me in my head, telling me things, and there's this feeling that part of my heart's missing." Erin looked up at Mal. "I've never told anyone this, not even Mum and Dad." "Then let's go and find her," Mal encouraged. "Cara can help us." "Do you really think you can trust her, Mal?" "Yes, I think so. Anyway, she's all we have who knows anything about the place where Miranda is incarcerated. We have to try, don't we?" "All right. We need to have a plan this time, though. We break up for Easter this Friday, 27th of March. I've got stuff on at the weekend, but we could go down on the Monday or Tuesday." "What are we going to tell Mum and Dad?" Mal looked worried. "I've already thought about this. We'll tell them we're going camping in Wales with friends. They won't know where we are when we contact them through our phones." Mal and Erin talked late into the night, deciding what to take with them, what they were going to do, and what else they needed to know before going. Cara texted Mal about the school. There was a lot of security and it was extremely difficult to get in without the proper papers. Strangely, she seemed to know how to help them. Mal trusted her, so Erin had to as well. Even though when Erin went to bed that night, she had an awful twisted pain in the pit of her stomach. She was scared this might not end well. Erin slept at intervals, but was jolted awake again and again, as dreams of being caged up and hearing the key turning in a rusty lock smothered her. In her head she could hear Petra and Shay laughing as they embraced. Her mother and father holding the hands of another girl, and then a green fog that twisted and turned around her ankles rose up like a tiger and roared in her face. In the distance she could see butterflies, hundreds of them of every colour, and then she saw all those who loved her pulling off their wings. Erin watched as the tiny lifeless bodies fell to the floor of the cell. She scooped them up and sobbed. She would never be free. A distant crash of thunder pulled her awake, and she slid out of bed, padded to the window, and watched the storm rolling around the coal-black sky. Pulling a blanket from the bed, Erin covered herself against the cold of the night, curling up to her giant teddy for warmth, and finally slept.